Hey, what is going on? Welcome to this episode number 190 of Life and Lessons. I'm Sean Spooner, and if you're new here, here's what you need to know. This podcast is a place where I share the life lessons I wish I knew sooner in my 20s, sometimes on my own and sometimes joined by the most interesting people I know. The only thing that's guaranteed with this podcast is that every time you press play, you're going to learn something new. And it's good to be back. It has been a little while since I've done a solo episode. I forget how long exactly, maybe 5 or so weeks. And it has been a long while since I've done a solo episode that appears here on YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, good to be back. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, I guess it's also good to be back because it has been a little while. But if you listen to the Johann or the David Robson episodes that have been released as guest episodes over the past few weeks, thank you for that. Johann is somebody whose work I really appreciate. His books, Lost Connection, Stolen Focus, and now Magic Pill are all incredible. I haven't actually read Chasing the Scream, but nonetheless, 3 of his 4 books, the ones I've read, are amazing. I've been trying to get him on the podcast for at least 2.5 years, and it was all booked in to talk about his previous book, Stolen Focus, a few years ago, but then some stuff happened in his life, which meant that the scheduling just didn't align. So I was sat here waiting to record and it had to be pulled at the last minute. But Johann kindly made sure that this time around, when he's promoting his new book, Magic Pill, he made the time to come on the podcast. It was amazing to chat. He brings a lot of energy. He talks about Ozempic and these new wave of weight loss drugs in such an accessible and such an easy to understand way. Now, of course, it's not something that's necessarily applicable to me. I do not need to take weight loss drugs. However, as a topic that I didn't understand and one that's going to have so much of an impact on all of our lives, on the whole of society, it was really good to hear Johann's take based on all the research he's done. And then a couple of weeks after that, you would have heard my conversation with David Robson to talk about his brand new book, The Laws of Connection. If you've been here a while, you will know David from the previous conversation when we spoke about his book, The Expectation Effect. I almost forgot the name there, The Expectation Effect, which is an incredible book. But his new book, The Laws of Connection, which is all about 13 ways to build and foster and maintain social connections, which are so vital to every area of our life. And David goes into some details on exactly what each of us can do beginning today to form stronger connections. So that conversation was great. If you have listened to either of those, thank you. If you haven't, they're both on YouTube and Spotify and Apple and wherever else it is that you get your podcast. So make sure that you do go back and give them a listen. I want to do 2 things today. I want to give you a little update about where I've been, what I've been up to, as I always do. And then there are a couple of ideas that have been in my mind over the past week or so that I just want to share with you and think out loud, as I often do. So where have I been? Well, in the short term, today, I've just got back from a park run. I have not showered. So if you're watching on YouTube and I look a bit disheveled, that will be why. I've been trying to get into doing park runs again as I'm doing this marathon training and trying to get more miles in and trying to remain consistent with running. Park run for the past few weeks has been a really nice way to encourage me to be a morning person on a Saturday. But also, there's just something really nice about looking at your watch on a Saturday morning and it's like 9:32 a.m. and you've already woken up and had some caffeine and gone for a drive and listened to a podcast and gone to this effectively social event and ran 5K and got a good time in the bag and been hydrated and been in the sun and got back to the car and it's like 9:30 in the morning. So pretty good. And this week and last week did park runs in different places. Last week in Kettering, this week in Cardiff. And then straight away after that, grabbed a newspaper, sat with a coffee, had some breakfast, chilled out, did some planning, did a few bits here and there, but just kind of had a chill morning on the back of doing that run. Feels really good. So that's what I've been up to today. More broadly in life, I think the only big update to give you is the book proposal progress, because I'm sure that last time I recorded the solo episode, I was telling you about the book proposal. And at the time I suggested that it was going to be a lot of rejection and a lot of being ignored. And so far the update is this: there has been a lot of rejection and a lot of being ignored, but there are different levels to rejection. It feels weird to talk about this because it's almost breaking the fourth wall in a way which may potentially harm my chance of getting an agent one day, right? Because I'm publicly sharing the fact that there has been rejection. But what you need to understand, and what any agent who would listen to this would understand, is that the chances of getting an agent are incredibly slim, and the process of deciding whether or not to represent a book is so incredibly subjective, and a book has to land with the right agent at the right time when they're looking for that specific kind of book for their list, and they're not already trying to sell another book that's similar to publishers. And there's all these moving pieces. So I'm not hesitant or afraid to talk about the rejection process. And then I say there are separate levels of rejection. So lots of the rejections you get through, some you don't even get a rejection through, right? These agents on their website say, if you haven't heard from us in 6 weeks, in 8 weeks, in 12 weeks, please consider that a rejection because we don't have time to get back to everybody. So there's that form of rejection, which there have been a few so far. There's then the second form of rejection, which is, I think they're called form rejections. And it's essentially like a one-line email which says, "Hi, Sean. Thanks so much for allowing us to consider your work. Whilst we really enjoyed reading your proposal, this isn't for our list right now. Best of luck in the future," right? Something like that. Nice enough, polite, makes you know, or rather lets you know that you're not going to be moving forward with that agent. So it's helpful, but it doesn't give you any specific feedback. And then there is a third kind of rejection, the really useful rejection, and actually the rejection that I've learned at this point, a few months into the process of querying agents, which is weirdly the rejection that you want to receive, which is personalized rejection. And that's when an agent has taken the time to read the proposal and the sample chapters, or little bits of both, and then they have offered you some feedback, either relating to the market or the potential readership or the viability as to why it's not right for their list. And whilst it sounds weird to want that kind of feedback, because of course the logical conclusion here is surely you just want to be accepted. Well, yes, sure, but the best way to eventually find an agent, if I were to do so, is to listen to the detailed and the personalized rejection of agents who have sold dozens, if not hundreds of books in the past. Because where I don't know what I'm doing, right? I've never written a full book before. I've certainly never sold a book to publishers. These people know exactly what they're doing, and they owe you nothing when it comes to writing these rejections, right? The majority of them are non-personalized. So when you get a personalized one with pointers or with specific reasons or with suggestions on what to do next to make it more viable within the marketplace, that is incredibly useful. So getting those has been useful. I think I sent maybe 30, maybe 40, somewhere in the region of those two numbers, proposals to agents 2 months ago, and then just paused, right? And my plan is to wait until the end of this year, gather back all the feedback, read what everybody's had to say, and then revisit the proposal, maybe action some of that feedback, and then go again early next year. Now that doesn't pause the progress of the book. The book is still going to progress. The book is still progressing, albeit slowly right now, because I've had other things going on. But I don't see much value in just continually focusing on like editing the proposal, sending it to more people, editing, sending, when it's still out there in the world with so many agents whose deadline have not passed and who have not yet actively rejected it, right? They may have rejected it and I just don't know about it, but it would be silly to shoot my shot too soon by making changes preemptively before all of the feedback is back. So my plan is hold off for now, revisit the proposal, and communicating with agents at probably the end of this, beginning of next year. So there's like a nice 6-month buffer between the two batches of proposals that I've sent out, and then go from there. So I think that's where we're at in life. And then there are these two ideas that I want to explore today. And the first actually comes from, in a way, the parkrun stuff I've spoken about, trying to run more, in a way, like sending out the proposal, remaining consistent. And it's this idea that probably since we last spoke, the biggest thing that I have been focusing on in life, more than any singular specific thing, is trying to be more consistent, right? Consistent with sleep and wake times and getting enough sleep. I'm using Whoop again for the first time in a couple of years, but predominantly just for sleep tracking. I don't care about the like strain scores and the you should aim to do this much strain today. I just want to know how much sleep I should have based on its algorithm. And then consistent in eating habits, right? So I'm having literally every single day identical breakfasts and lunch and like snack and a big salad, right? And trying to get 10-ish fruit and veg in every single day. Fitness, staying really consistent with that. So for the past however many weeks, I've done 2 runs at least each week and 2 to 3 gym visits each week, following the same plan each time, following a consistent path towards these goals. Days and times for content, whether it's this podcast, whether it's the little lessons, whether it's the email newsletter, whether it's the shorts, whether it's the book, whether it's like guest outreach and all this other stuff that I'm doing, staying consistent. So I know that, for example, between 5 p.m. and 7 p.m. on a Monday evening is when I film, edit, and schedule short form content. It's consistent and I know it's happening. And then things which you wouldn't quite consider living in the realm of consistency, like intentional days off and days which are designed exclusively for life admin, so that I'm taking care of those important but non-urgent tasks. And then making progress feel as predictable as possible and reducing the chance of me kind of veering off course. I've learned this about myself over the past 5 or 6 years and have documented it on this podcast many times over, which is that when I'm being consistent, although it perhaps doesn't feel like it at the time, and I'll talk about that later, I am making progress. Whereas the second I lose that consistency and that momentum, and I don't know whether this is just me or whether I recognize it more than others, but I find myself quickly veering off track and feeling like I need a big reset and needing to begin again. And so I think that what I'm aiming for right now, in a weird way, is essentially the opposite of monk mode. Now, you've probably heard monk mode. I made a podcast about it almost exactly 2 years ago, actually. And that wasn't the first time I had strayed into trying it. I think I discovered the concept years back when Iman Gadzi made a video about it, before it was like cool and trendy, although I guess it was somewhat zeitgeisty by then if that guy was making a video about it. But it was before everybody and your favorite podcasters and your favorite influencers were talking about it, right? It was just this silly idea. Now, monk mode is this idea that for a fixed period of time, you essentially lock yourself away, you cut off your social life, you focus deeply on work, you work every hour you can, you sleep every hour you can, you drink enough water and eat the right foods, but you do it in such a way where it is essentially at the detriment of every other area of your life. It's like progress at all costs. And this concept has become trendy. And I guess in some ways it's useful for certain people, right? If you happen to find yourself in a place in life right now as you listen to this podcast where things are incredibly difficult and you realize that you have very little on your side other than time. So if you have no experience and no money and no connections and no obvious path forward, well then yes, something like monk mode probably is for you, because it's a way to strain as much out of the limited time that you have as possible, so that in a shortened period of time you make as much progress to then get some of those resources, whether it's money or connections or experience, right? There's a time and a place for monk mode, but the problem is, for most people, this whole monk mode idea has turned into kind of self-improvement for self-improvement's sake, and it punishes balance. It punishes days off. It punishes the very natural rhythm that all of our lives get into, where some days you wake up and feel incredible. Some days you're incredibly motivated. Some days you know what you need to do and you go and do it, but other days you don't. And the last thing you need on those days is for the pursuit of progress to feel hard. Like that bar is so high because you must do these 11 things or else you failed the day already, right? That's not, for most of us, how real progress happens. And so what I've been trying to do recently is, where monk mode makes progress feel hard, I've been doing everything I can to make progress feel easy. The idea of trying to remain as consistent as possible without any parameters, right? There's no spreadsheet tracking this. There's no tick list every day that I wake up and say I need to do this shit, but rather working out what is good when it comes to nutrition or hydration or productivity or sleep or movement or running or gym or morning stretches is something else I've been doing, right? And then working out the best time and the best way to do that thing so that it feels as low impact as possible. It feels the furthest from cumbersome that it can. And then building that into your day. Because what you're really aiming for, if you're trying to do a lot in life and if you're trying to form positive habits, is for those habits to quickly almost fade into the fabric of your life, right? If something feels incredibly difficult, you either need to think about it a lot or you need to drop it out when things get difficult. And neither of those solutions, both of which come along when something like monk mode is involved, neither of those solutions are optimal, right? On the days when I'm incredibly busy, I don't need to think about whether or not I need to go for a run tonight. It's already in the calendar. Whether or not I need to go to bed at 11:20 p.m. tonight, Whoop's already telling me. What I'm going to eat for breakfast and lunch today, and should I just pop to the burger van down the road? No. I have decided way ahead of time, weeks in advance, because I eat the same thing every day for breakfast and lunch, exactly what I'm eating. So that in the first 2 meals and like snacky salad thing of the day, I'm getting like 10 fruit and veg, 90 grams of protein, a fairly balanced set of micronutrients, and I feel good, right? So there's that. And the second one is if it feels hard, the days when, you can't be bothered and you're trying to follow something like monk mode, the last thing you need is for it to feel hard. It needs to fade into the background. In the same way that when you wake up, right? You woke up today and you brushed your teeth. I'm sure you did, right? You didn't need to think about whether or not you needed to brush your teeth. You've done it habitually for so long that it's just part of your day, right? It's part of that fabric of your day. You don't need to think about it. You just do what is arguably a positive action. And I say it's arguably a positive action because you probably pay no attention to it. But believe me, if you stopped brushing your teeth, we would all know about it fairly soon, right? So trying to build those positive habits in a easy feeling way so that they become part of that fabric, so they are as system one and automatic as brushing your teeth or making your bed or, I don't know, having a glass of water in the morning, right? That's what I've been focusing on. And it's almost the antidote to this monk mode nonsense, which looks great on the internet, but pay attention next time you see somebody tell you that they're doing 75 hard, which I have tried, or monk mode, which I have tried, because people will talk loudly about it in the early days when it's going well because they've had a 6-day streak where things haven't been that difficult and they've had enough sleep and they're feeling okay and they're motivated, right? But 75 hard, you hardly ever see people post about for 75 days because guess what? It's, for most people, in most circumstances, a stupid challenge that leaves people failing, right? Monk mode. People talk about it in the early days. Oh, I'm doing monk mode. Man, I'm on my self-improvement. I'm on this. But then like a week in, they're back in a nightclub or they're back smoking or they're back drinking or they're back doing all the things that they told themselves they wouldn't do in monk mode. And it's because people set the bar too high. They think that making progress and self-improvement needs to be all or nothing. And actually both of those are false. Of course, it can't be nothing or else you're not improving, but it also sustainably can't be all. It can't guide every single moment of your day because as much as we would all want it to, that's just not how progress happens. So you need to find something in the middle where you're building these habits, as I have been trying to do over the past few weeks, which are repeatable and predictable and happen at the same time in the same way. And you know that they're positive and they're really low impact in the sense that they don't take a lot from you to get started with them. And then they just fade into the background. They become part of the furniture of your life and they're just kind of sat there and they happen and you progress, right? I think that's really important. So that's idea number one that I wanted to speak about. And then idea number two is kind of similar in a sense. Well, it's not, but it's tangential. And it's also about the idea of undetectable progress because what's today? I'm recording this on Saturday. On Thursday, I had a funny realization. So we were in Cardiff and I was doing a tour of an apartment, which we might move into next year. And this place was fancy, right? It was like on the 22nd floor of this big brand new skyscraper. And there's like a gym in there and pool tables and co-working spaces and cinema rooms and a concierge and like all of the fancy furniture you could ever imagine. This place was really fancy, but it wasn't that which gave me this realization. It was when I stepped to the window and looked out over Cardiff and down there on the right-hand side, it was weird because it was almost like the buildings had parted to give us a really clear view of this. I could see the Big Yellow, which is maybe like a mile away. We were high up. And it was this funny full circle moment because on the drive there, I was having a conversation with somebody on the phone about how progress always, 100% of the time, feels undetectable in the moment. Even when you're in the gym, right? And it feels like you're really making progress. 2 minutes later, those muscles have stopped hurting and they haven't yet grown. It's impossible to feel progress. You can't feel progress. It's not something that is felt. And so we assume that it's not happening. And I was having this conversation, reminding somebody of this concept, whilst myself, in some ways, I'll be honest, feeling like I hadn't progressed, right? We're over halfway through this year. I have a bunch of goals for this year. Most of them have not been hit. Many of them probably won't be hit. And so it's easy to feel like I've made no progress, right? But then I look out over at the Big Yellow. And if you don't know, because why would you, unless you've been here for an incredibly long time, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, we took on our first proper office in Cardiff as a business. And it was this tiny box room, probably no bigger than the meeting room I'm in right now, in the Big Yellow. Big Yellow, of course, being a self-storage place, but upstairs in Cardiff and in a few cities, they have these very basic, very small office suites. And when we were working in there, we weren't any less ambitious. We weren't any less motivated. We weren't any less kind of aspirational as to what we wanted to achieve. But just by virtue of the fact that we were so early on as a business, and we had at that point almost a decade less experience each, right? We were a lot younger. It was a very different time back then. We couldn't access most of the things that we wanted to, right? Our turnover was way lower. Our client list was way smaller. We definitely weren't traveling to places like New York for projects. I didn't even drive at the time, let alone own a car. I hardly knew myself. I was super underweight and spotty and couldn't look somebody in the eye when I spoke to them. And if I was sat in a meeting, I wouldn't really know what to say. And that's if we got a meeting, because most of the time our sales efforts fell on their ass. Like, when I compare where we are now as a business, which by the way isn't where we want to be because there's always progress to be made, to where we were back then, it's really easy to see what's changed. Of course it is. I mean, I was stood on the 22nd floor of this big brand new skyscraper in the fanciest apartment building in Cardiff, having just driven there in my Mercedes with all of the fucking physical possessions I could ever want to buy, because there's nothing I want or need to buy right now. Way more confident, fucking almost 200 episodes of a podcast in, publishing content on the internet, knowing who I am, making good progress with my fitness and eating well and all of this stuff. And yet, an hour earlier, I was having to talk myself out of the idea that nothing had changed, that no progress had been made, that I was the same person that I was 8 years ago, that the business is the same business that it was 8 years ago. And in a weird way, if you follow it to its logical conclusion, I guess the thought process there was slightly what's the point, right? If it takes 10 years to make no progress, which I was convincing myself at the time was the case, what's the point of trying? What's the point of giving up the next 10 years to progress? But then there I was, stood in this fancy apartment, looking down on the building where 8 years earlier, 7 or 8 years earlier, I forget when it was, that journey had started. And although the day by day growth and changes and progress felt undetectable, in a very literal and metaphorical sense, the growth was very real, right? Because I was stood in a very different building, in a very different situation, with a very different set of circumstances, as in many ways a very different person. And I mean, look, we're not going to move anytime soon. I think I'll probably move into somewhere early next year in the centre of Cardiff, just to kind of live out my late 20s and early 30s, somewhere a bit more exciting than the Welsh Valleys. However, what I did take away from that viewing is that idea that whilst it felt like nothing had changed, everything had changed. And that means that when I stand at the edge of the metaphorical cliff right now, worrying that I'm not making enough progress, worrying that things aren't going fast enough, worrying that in the year and a bit's time when I turn 30, I won't be the person I thought I'd be, or I won't have done the things I thought I'd done, or I won't be making the progress I ought to be making, that I probably will be okay. And that however you feel about your progress right now, you probably will be okay, because progress is incredibly hard to measure until it's not, right? And that's so pithy and platitudey, but it's real, because nothing changes until everything changes, right? Your favorite footballer wasn't the fourth best in the world until they were. Your favorite musician wasn't selling out world tours until they were. Your favorite business person wasn't a multimillionaire until they were. And none of those things happened in one day. None of those things even happened in 1 year. They took years and years and years and years. And there's a chapter in the book all about this idea. And you would be amazed if you knew how long some of your favorite performers and musicians and business people and athletes had been going before you even knew their name, right? Matt Rife, I've definitely spoken about this before in content, but Matt Rife, the comedian who has just sold out an enormous world tour. I think he sold 660,000 tickets in 2 hours. And those tickets aren't cheap, big boy tickets to arenas all around the world. Sold them out in 2 hours. He's got hundreds of millions of likes on TikTok. He is the hottest comedian in the world right now. Netflix specials. Everybody knows his name. Everybody sees his content. He did 11 years of these kind of back alley comedy shows where you would have to pay to perform. You weren't paid. You didn't do it for free. You had to pay to perform. 11 years where nobody knew his name, where nobody cared, where nobody showed up, and I'm sure where it felt to him like he was making no progress. And in some ways, he was making no progress. Day to day, he probably wasn't, right? His jokes weren't measurably better day by day. His charisma wasn't measurably better day by day. And yet, he's probably touring in your city this year. He wasn't doing that 11 years ago. So things change slowly, but that does not mean that they're not changing. I think that's all I've got. I don't know how long this episode's been. This has felt quite long. I'm not sure. But thank you, as always, for listening. It's good to be back here on YouTube if you are watching. If not, it's just good to be back generally. I am recording with a very exciting returning guest on Monday. That won't be out for a couple of weeks, but you'll probably see that in 2 weeks' time on YouTube and on Spotify and on Apple. Next week, I'm going to try and do another solo episode. I'm trying to get into the cadence of doing these a bit more frequently because all the other content seems to have kind of nicely found a place in my schedule. This still has not. So that's the plan. And so with all that said, thank you as always for listening. And I will see you back here this time next week for episode number 191 of Life and Lessons. See you then.